think about what you can give before you can get. Get rid of the ego, get rid of your attachment to a particular outcome, and think about if you want to see a change in the world, think about what it's going to take. And if you're really going to change the world, you need a lot of people on your side.
You're listening to Pubcast Worldwide.
Greetings, thirsty listeners, and welcome to this episode of Pubcast Worldwide, the podcast where we get to know interesting people around the world, chatting with them over beers, cocktails, and other libations at the coolest pubs, bars, and breweries on the planet. I'm your host, Chris Lukey, a media maverick, serial event planner, and in my daytime hours, a sales guy for a manufacturing company. Today, we're going to the beach. We're heading to the Los Angeles area where we'll be talking with Krisztina Z Holly, who is one of the most fascinating people I've ever met and certainly one of the most fascinating people ever to jump on this show. So, who is Z Holly? Well, some of the things about her that may catch your ear right off the bat are the fact that she created the first ever TEDx event, or how she's serving as the entrepreneur in residence to the mayor's office in Los Angeles. This only begins to scratch the surface of Z's accomplishments. So, what are the 3 things you can expect from today's episode? First, you are going to get to know an incredibly multifaceted entrepreneur. Z goes by many titles, including engineer, innovator, podcast host, and she's got the experience to back these up. Whether it's been her roles with tech startups, serving as a scuba instructor, or producing documentaries, Z shares the stories behind these jobs and helps us understand the common thread throughout these experiences that have allowed her to have such a diverse career. Second, as a bit of a follow-up to that, Z gives us some actionable advice around taking risks and also some tips, tools, and stories around the importance of being open to new, unexpected experiences and opportunities, or, simply put, just saying yes. Finally, I don't know how else to say it, but we just have some fun with this episode. You'll get to hear about Z's adventurous side, a bit about her work with Burning Man, and being an LA native, she gives us a little insight into how you can explore the authentic food scene in the area as well. Not to mention, since we were recording this episode in a bar on the beach, there are a couple of surprises that pop up in the show towards the end. It's certainly the anything goes, roll with the punches type of episode that this podcast was always intended to be. As far as the destination goes, we met up at the beachside restaurant and bar along Mother's Beach in Marina del Rey. Nothing super notable about this joint other than that it has a beautiful view of the marina behind us, where we were actually using that as a backdrop for a video shoot for my day job. I won't get into that too much here in the intro since we describe it at the start of the interview, but yeah, this was really somewhat of an impromptu episode. Prepared or not, I think you'll enjoy the flow, and I know you're going to love getting to hear Z's story as much as I did. With that, it's time to head to the LA sun. Grab your swimsuit, grab your sandals, seriously, don't forget those things, and finally, get thirsty so we can head down to Marina del Rey to meet up with Krisztina Z Holly.
I've been drinking to forget just how good it was. I was drinking with you, then I'm drinking till noon, now I'm drinking by myself.
Z, since you chose the destination today, we always kick off the Pubcast with explaining where we're at. So where are we today, and what are we drinking?
All right, we are on Mother's Beach in Marina del Rey in Southern California. Great view of these amazing boats and kayaks and palm trees. And we're drinking, well, you're drinking a beer. You're drinking an IPA.
Yes, I am drinking an IPA. I'm going to need to look up what specific one it was. It was a local one.
Is it?
Yeah, something, can't remember, something dog or something?
I don't know.
Does that ring a bell? Oh, well.
But I don't know. But for some reason, I chose mezcal. I usually like mezcal, though this particular one isn't the best one I've had. It tastes a little bit like paint thinner, but that's okay.
Got it. No, that's a bummer. Well, maybe I won't mention the venue then because they'll be upset about their mezcal.
No, that's quite all right. I'm sure
I'm sure they've got bigger things
There's
to worry about.
There's many restaurants around here. It could be any one of them.
Yes, very true. I will say this is uncharacteristically hot and not what I expected for coming down to LA in October. Maybe I should have been a bit smarter about
I think
that.
it hit 95 65 today by the beach, which is usually unheard of even in the summertime.
That is pretty crazy. Yeah, this was also the first trip where I strategically decided not to bring shorts and flip-flops for whatever reason, because I'm like, I never need them when I go anywhere. I bring them every time, but that would have been smart today.
Always bring shorts, flip-flops, a bathing suit. Always a good idea.
I've learned my lesson this time around. I needed to make a little mistake like this to figure that out. But we are having what I would call a little bit of an impromptu pubcast today, since you and I are actually here waiting for the sun to adjust itself so we can do a video for, actually, I don't even think I've talked about this on the show before. I do a video series called Manufacturing Happy Hour, where a very similar premise, there's beer and there's a topic, but that's very much focused around the manufacturing sector. And one of the many things that you do is a podcast on the art of manufacturing, called The Art of Manufacturing.
Yeah, it's about entrepreneurs who make stuff.
Yeah, and actually this would be a good time for me to give you a proper interview. For those listening today, I am joined by Krisztina Z Holly, who easily has the biggest cornucopia of experiences of anyone I've ever had on the show before.
I'm actually 200 years old.
I mean, for everything you've done, it's like probably 200 times more than most people do in a lifetime, because you've been involved in tech startups, you've been involved in founding innovation centers at USC and your alma mater, MIT. You are now doing, like we said, the art of manufacturing, and you are in the middle of a nonprofit, correct?
Yeah,
called
that's right.
Make It in LA. And we haven't even talked about like being an adventurer and being a certified scuba diver. So if you're listening out there, we do have an incredibly interesting person on the show today. But Z, that's just my intro. Fill in some of the gaps that I might have missed.
Oh, God, throwing it back in my lap here. But I think if I were to look back on my career so far, I think my passion and my purpose has been to help find undiscovered talent ideas and help them tell their stories, help them make impact. It's really about helping people create things that are bigger than themselves in a way. When I started innovation centers, as you mentioned, at MIT and at USC, and they helped dozens of faculty start venture-backed businesses, and also the very first ever TEDx, we created that at USC.
I can't believe I did not mention that. Yes,
That's
that
okay,
is
but-
that is astounding that you started the first one.
Yeah, it was just such a rewarding experience. I curated and hosted that for 4 years, and just helping really smart people, finding really interesting people who hadn't told their stories yet, and helping them get on stage and helping them craft that story. And now kind of refocusing that energy in the area of manufacturing. And that really, I think of manufacturing as being very similar, that you're taking an idea, one thing, like an invention or a design, and you're turning that into something that's at scale, something that impacts hundreds, thousands, millions of lives. It's another instantiation of that same concept of making something bigger than yourself.
And, speaking of making something bigger than yourself, you've obviously had some iterations in your career. So I'd love it if you could kind of take us back to the beginning and kind of what drew you to tech and manufacturing, and what was that draw that made it the right fit and maybe something that allowed you to do something that was bigger than yourself?
That's a good question. I mean, I always loved science and math and school, and it was really, I think, if I look back at, there's a moment, it was like a watershed moment in my life when I was 13 years old, and I felt really out of place. I felt like I wasn't like anyone else, and then I went to camp on Catalina Island, which is off the coast of LA.
Yeah.
So I actually grew up here in LA, and I learned how to scuba dive, became incredibly, as you mentioned, I was incredibly passionate about it. I became one of the youngest scuba instructors actually at the time.
Really?
Moment I turned 18, I was a senior in high school, and my mom and my dad, this is a side note here, but my mom said, you were going to learn more in a week and a half at instructor training course than you will in a week and a half in high school. So
I
go
believe
for
that.
it.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest things I've ever learned have been through experiences outside of my traditional schooling.
absolutely.
It's helped, but it's really the experiences that I feel like are more memorable, and in terms I draw more from, in terms of what I learned, what I failed at, etc.
Yeah, and like really in a way, it was a much more memorable way also to learn physics, Boyle's Law, and all these things that you don't normally think of as being physics, right? And when I came back, I actually taught my AP physics class how to scuba dive.
Really?
After our AP test, we had 2 weeks left, and we had the semester. And the teacher said, "Okay, we're going to take a poll. There's a bunch of stuff. Any ideas on what we should do in the last 2 weeks? Because you've basically taken the test." So I proposed that I would teach my class how to scuba dive, and my two of my teachers and my class, we did the whole thing, and I certified my whole class. It was so much fun.
That is impressive. I can't imagine how many waivers you guys had to go through to get that
one
done.
One parent that would not allow her daughter to do it. I'm surprised it was only one parent.
That is, yeah, that's true. Those aren't conundrums we have in the Midwest, because we have a river you can jump in, and that's about it. So.
I have done some diving expeditions in lakes though before, and it's not fun, but
yeah. It's
purposeful.
I've seen people do their training in lakes before. Like,
Yeah.
I was a little surprised, but apparently there are just deep water lakes that are a good spot to get your certification. So
quarries can be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done limited scuba diving. I've just done kind of like 12 meters, 12 feet, whatever. The kind of you can take a crash course. And then jump into it.
So just to go back to like what that moment was.
Yep.
Catalina Island. Spent the summer camp there, and it was the coolest thing. I was taking all these classes in marine biology and oceanography and underwater photography and scuba diving, sailing, all this stuff. And I realized, oh my God, okay, yes, I'm weird, but I'm not alone. And I think that was kind of the moment when I realized that I had this calling towards pursuing some sort of science or engineering. And it kind of went from, and then I went to MIT, and then that was the next step.
Got it. And I guess, one thing I'm curious about is you started your career in startups. And then from there you've gone to, like you said, creating the first TEDx, doing the innovation centers. What was it like getting into tech startups kind of before tech startups were the hottest thing? And then what was it that motivated you to make the change? Because I could see anyone getting very much into that specific field, but what made you curious to go other directions after that?
It is funny you say like tech before it was popular. I can't. It just makes me laugh when I think about this was early 90s, and I used to tell myself and tell people, man, if only being a tech entrepreneur were popular and had the same status as being a rock star or a athlete. It's like, oh my God, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because it kind of is now, and it isn't actually the best thing. It really was, back then, it was very much meritocracy. It was not corrupted by money in the same way. For better or for worse, I mean, obviously it's nice that there's a lot of money floating around in it now. And I think more recently I've moved into the manufacturing sector because I see this opportunity. I see this just amazing richness of resources, especially in LA. Most people don't know that LA is the largest manufacturing center in the country. And for every job, they think that it's all about Hollywood here.
I was going to say, most people that are listening are probably thinking that to themselves right now.
Well, for every job in film and television, and in fact, we're listening to Frankie Goes to Hollywood right now in the background. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, you don't have the headphones on, so that's kind of blocking it out.
But for every job in film and television, there's 4 jobs in manufacturing in LA.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a really important part of the economy, but it's underserved. It's not as connected. I mean, in Hollywood or in tech here, if you want to start a business or create a film, create a TV show, and you're in the industry, you know exactly who to call to put together a team really quickly and just get it done. Whereas in manufacturing, if you're a designer or someone with an idea, an inventor, you don't know where to start. And so I think there's this huge opportunity, and I see it's the same thing that I've done in the past, but just in a different field. And I think that it's all about community. It's all about building. It's the culture. It's the connectivity. It's about supporting the entrepreneurs and helping the entrepreneurs learn how to scale and then get access to the resources that they need and raising awareness. Because back when I went back to my alma mater at MIT and started the Deshpande Center, which was this for technological innovation, it was this center there was not a lot of interest in tapping universities for innovation. It was not something that people really thought of. And so just raising the awareness of the potential that you can find in universities was something that was really exciting. And I guess I have to say that what I should do for my own sanity and my success is I should probably just stay where I've built a career and just like really milk it for all it's worth, but I get bored, so I gotta move on.
I think you've made a good point. I was going to jump into manufacturing first, but I kind of want to get your advice on this, because I think this is something that would interest our listeners and that I've gotten questions on before, is there's this common thread throughout your career of, and I think the way you phrased it was finding untapped talent, finding that potential and finding ways to maximize it. So there is a thread throughout your career, but you've done a lot of different things professionally and personally as well. What would be your input around how to whether find that thread or be comfortable taking that risk to do different things? I think a lot of people do think to themselves, I should just be sticking to one thing, or this is what I've always done, this is what I should continue to do.
So I think that the key to taking risks is to practice. And I think that in the world, there's this meme that we hear more and more now, and that we should embrace failure. And the truth is that I think that failure is okay. You need to be okay with it, but we really shouldn't embrace it. Like Elon Musk once said, I'd rather learn from success.
Yeah.
But there is something that, and I think failure is the wrong word, because it's never failure unless you quit, right? Or if you die. That's a little bit of a failure. But I think that you can make small mistakes and iterate. It's really a matter of iteration. And the key is that the more you do it, the more you realize it's the picking yourself back up again that's the real key. And so the more you practice and learn that, oh, okay, well, I can survive that. I mean, there have been plenty of times when I've survived some crazy stuff, and it was after that I got this confidence that, oh, well, I can actually, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna take risks. So you have to. Right now, I'm really getting into rock. I've been getting into rock climbing last year.
Okay.
And so that's
something
been
else to add to your arsenal.
I know. I don't even know if that's my bio, but no, seriously, I've been getting into it. And there's something called lead climbing, and that's where you're not on a top rope. So if you fall, the consequences are higher. You're still on a rope, but you fall way farther. And so the best advice that I ever got from somebody was, you have to practice falling. Because the more you practice falling, not only the better you are, unless you get injured, the more confidence you have. So you're not thinking about the falling, you're thinking about the climbing. So I think that that's really the key. And so the fact that when I was in academia, I was at 2 different universities, and I'd already moved from one amazing university to another, and I was able to take risks. First of all, because I had the air cover from the provost, who's now the president, actually, and he's like, just go do what you need to do. So you need that, right? But the other thing is that I started realizing that the faculty around me who had tenure were paralyzed with this accomplishment. The fact that they had accomplished so much, they had tenure. Ironically, tenure, which is what supposedly gives you the flexibility to take risks, is actually this anchor on you, because you feel like you've worked so hard to get this stature, you don't want to lose it. And you don't want to you don't want to leave the university, because it's your whole life had been. Meanwhile, I had already had several careers at that point. So for me, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? I move on and I go do something else. And I think you still have to keep your integrity. I mean, you have to do the right thing. It's not a matter of doing something wrong. It's a matter of taking the risk that you believe is right. And knowing that the worst that happens, you pick yourself back up again.
Great advice. So practice is the best thing to do with
That's
risk.
a long way of saying practice.
No, it's good info, and I think we'll wrap up this first segment of the show, because you always seem to be doing something new, and one of the new things you've started taking on is the art of manufacturing, doing your own podcast as well. And I wouldn't mind you taking us through that journey a little bit, just in terms of why you decided to jump on that train, why you thought that was a good medium for spreading the word about the manufacturing message you were hoping to convey.
Yeah, I think that just through the work that I've been doing, after I left USC, I was approached by the mayor of LA, Mayor Garcetti, to explore the idea of having an entrepreneur in residence program. And he asked, like, would you be interested in helping develop this program and be an entrepreneur in residence? And I said, yeah, I'd love to try it, as long as I can focus on an area that I thought was untapped. And
sure.
My idea was manufacturing. He thought it was a great idea. And through that process, I met so many amazing people. And I also had done a stint in the 90s between startups as a documentary associate producer and an editor, and I love the storytelling aspect of it. But to be honest, the whole video piece is really complex. It takes a lot of effort, and to do it well. And I have very high standards. But I realized that it's also hard to keep people's interest for more than a few minutes. Whereas podcasting, and I love listening to podcasts, it's a very intimate medium. And it's the kind of medium where you can talk for an hour and really get into the content, and you don't feel like you have to exploit the guest to keep people's interest. You really can get into the stories.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what the hell? I'm going to give it a shot. And I just love it. I just love, I love moderating discussions. I love interviewing people anyway, and I think that this is a really great medium where I can help people tell their stories on my terms.
Got it. Well, you have been an excellent storyteller thus far, and if I'm looking at the sun, we might be doing our video here in just a second. It might be where we need it to be. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back for round 2 here shortly. So sit tight for just a second. Back for round 2. Sun is going down. It's not 100 degrees anymore.
We got Survivor in the background. I love it.
Yeah, it's been an 80s soundtrack all evening here at what's this place called again? At the Beach Club? Is it?
No. What is it?
Oh no, it's Beachside Restaurant and Bar.
Beachside, yes.
Yeah,
that's right.
Beachside Restaurant and Bar.
On Mother's Beach.
Mother's Beach. Yeah, someone was telling me about that before. So the beach behind us is where moms take their kids when they're growing up in LA. Is that how it works?
It's because it's in a marina, there's no big waves. But then again, I don't think that I'd want my kid to be in this water because this is the marina.
Yeah,
so,
that can be a dicey spot to jump in the water. Anywhere near a lot of boats can be tricky. But we're back for round 2, and I'll let you lead off with what you're drinking because your drink looks way cooler than
round
mine.
2. They actually brought this gratis, I think, because they're doing samples for this party they're putting together.
Right. I think you're correct.
And I don't remember what she called it, but it's kind of like a pina colada. It has rum and pineapple, and there's even a maraschino cherry, and that could be a plus or a minus depending on your point of view.
I'm gonna go plus. Anytime there's a cherry added, that's always a good thing in my book. And I've moved to, I think, a Long Beach Blonde is what they called it. I might be incorrect on what I'm calling it, but certainly a refreshing beachside beverage to kick off round 2. And there are any number of directions I can go with my first question, but I'm gonna bring something up since we were getting on the adventure track and the exploration track. A charm list. You mentioned a charm list. You mentioned this is what you do instead of a
offline
bucket
before we
list.
came back. Yeah, I do not believe in bucket lists because I think that bucket lists, you have this attachment to an outcome. You're like, I want to get these 3 things or 10 things before I die.
Yeah.
Now, in your pursuit of those 10 things, 2 things. First of all, if you don't achieve them, you're disappointed. Second of all, for each one of those things, as you're trying to pursue it, you're probably missing 10 other amazing things that you could just say yes to. And that's what my charm list is. These are things that I keep it on my phone just because it helps remind, like, whatever, for fun. These are things that I've had an opportunity to do, and
give me an example of one just to help paint a picture.
Shall I pull it up?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
All means,
this could be actually embarrassing because I don't actually read it. I just have it there. It's like
Because I agree with what you say that a bucket list can be very results focused. I think part of a bucket list is reframing that in your mind to be as excited about the journey to get there.
Yes.
And in which case I think a bucket list is a great thing because I will admit I'm a bucket lister.
True.
But I'm just as excited about. I think the one I was talking about is I want to go to 100 countries by the time I'm 60. I'm not rushing to do it because it's just one of those things that keeps me curious and it's something fun to do on an annual, frequent basis, throughout my life that keeps me curious.
Yeah, but in that, if you're so single-minded in that focus, and I have to say one of the things that helped reinforce this kind of living in the moment is I go to Burning Man. I didn't go this year, but I actually have played a role. Like I helped build the airport, and I
just another little thing
that
you've done.
But at Burning Man, like one of the things that you learn is if you're too focused on a particular outcome, then you're gonna be like wildly unsatisfied. However, if you just go with the flow and you just say, yes to things, the playa provides, you get, you run into the craziest stuff, and you just have to, what you're looking for is probably in front of you. You just don't realize you're looking for it, right? So if you're focused on that goal of 100 countries, you don't appreciate the experiences that you're actually having. Like just sitting here, right here, beach behind us.
Totally agree.
Palm trees.
Totally
like
agree.
This is amazing, right?
And you're right. I think I was going to say I blame my engineering background for being a very results-focused,
Hey, and I'm an
metric
engineer too,
individual.
but yeah.
So I guess that's not an argument in this case. But I do agree with that perception and I think that's one thing I work on every day is trying to be more in the moment because I'm very much preparing for the next thing.
Yeah, and I do tend to
times.
do that too. So so here's a random sampling for my list here. Like, played basketball with Marvin Gaye. That was like when I was 12 though. Eaten rotten shark, fish testicles.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff. I won't even keep going.
Can't wait till our food conversation.
Right, I know. Helped build the space shuttle. Swam with dolphins and helped teach them language.
So is this something that you come up with after you've done
yes,
them then?
that
Okay,
is the point.
got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's like the things you okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I'm down with that. I think some people do journaling, like, in like a gratitude journal essentially. That's
Yes.
a tool I've seen people use. So, no, I like that. And that kind of appeals to my engineering tendencies. Again, it's like, I can turn this into a list now.
Right,
So,
but it's
yeah.
in retrospect. And so
Yeah.
I think that my charm list is probably 10 times as long as an average person's bucket list already.
Yeah,
And I
I
haven't
could-
died yet.
I could definitely see that. I mean, you've done some incredible things, so I'm going to guess a lot of people are going to have trouble catching up to the length of your charm list.
But
down
that's
the
because
line.
I'm good at saying yes, right?
True.
Like a lot of times, had I been so single-mindedly focused on becoming a lawyer or becoming whatever it is that people have as their life goal, I would not have achieved any of these. And I don't want to say achieve, it's not experienced these things, right?
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think there are a lot of people that, like you said, can get so singularly focused that they miss what's going on right in
Yep.
front of them. And I also think it's a good way to appreciate all the good things that
Yeah.
people have going on as
There
well,
is
too.
Great. I hope that's okay if I go off the reservation here.
For sure.
Okay. But
That's why it's a podcast, and that's why it's
all right.
round 2. This is
Yeah,
the tipsy
yeah.
talk. You can blame the drinks later.
I'm not done with my second drink yet. But there's a researcher or a professor in the UK named Richard Wiseman, and he did this series of studies about luck, and really fascinating. He put an ad in the newspaper asking people if they consider themselves lucky or unlucky to come and be part of a study. And so people would come in, they'd be asked, do you consider yourself lucky or unlucky? And then they were asked to go through a newspaper, just flip the pages, count the number of advertisements in the newspaper, and then report back on the results. So surprisingly, the lucky people and the unlucky people were pretty equally, like they got the answer. There's 43 ads or whatever in this paper for the most part. The difference is the lucky group got to the answer way faster than the unlucky group. Do you know why?
Why is that? I couldn't guess.
Because if you flip the first page, there was on one of the pages that actually said, stop counting, there are 43 ads in this paper. It so happens that the lucky people also have a sense of openness and also extroversion. That's what he's found. But openness to experience, they noticed that. So the folks that are unlucky were very single-minded in their purpose, and they were counting, whereas the lucky people, there's this correlation with this openness to experience and to just keeping your mind open to new information. So it was a really good example that it's really important to be open, because you're going to be more lucky. You can actually be more lucky by being open.
I mean, because I would see that correlation, because I don't know if I believe in luck in the traditional sense per se. I think the definition of luck that I've always prescribed to is that it's when opportunity and hard work intersect.
Yeah.
You know, many times someone's like, oh, this person got lucky. They made it big
Right.
because they were lucky. Well, chances are they were doing a lot of the work that led up to that over time. And then when the right opportunity presented itself, that's when they were able to fall into that situation.
Yeah, true. And I think it is also the aspect of extroversion and just being open. The great example was one of one of my guests on the podcast, Courtney Nichols Gould. She has a company called Smarty Pants Vitamins, and she and her husband actually, they started this company together, fell in love. I mean, not the ideal situation.
Sure.
A little complicated.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she and her husband, she tells a story about how they would be trying to get the first customers for their product. They created these gummy vitamins. And how no matter where they would go, they would carry samples and they would try to share it with people and then ask them if they like them to do reviews on Amazon, et cetera, and share it with their friends. And so she tells a great story about how they're in this movie theater and there's a family behind them and they're mainly aimed at kids to start. So the whole thing about how he's like, I'm going to share it with the family behind. And she's like, oh my God, but it's so creepy. You're just like this dude giving them these vitamins and, that's like, they don't even know who you are. But that's what it takes is to just say yes, and try new things.
There's a lot of putting yourself out there. So charm lists is where this started. And I made an exception for this second round because I always like to ask a guest first a good drinking story as well.
Yeah.
Something that has probably not been shared on any other podcast before. And is preferably one that helps us get to know you better. Does not need to be one that's mortifying by any means.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is we had this event a couple weeks ago called Maker Walk.
Yeah.
It was way better than I had ever dreamed, too. It was just this crazy idea we had months and months ago. The idea that manufacturers, factories, businesses would open their doors in a neighborhood to have these self-guided tours around the neighborhood, and then you'd go in and you'd be able to see behind the scenes. And so Maker Walk was a huge success, and we had Green Bar Distillery, and also we had Angel City Brewery open their doors, and they're great tours. And Green Bar Distillery is the largest organic distillery in the world.
Really?
But they're not that big. They're in the neighborhood of the Arts District.
Sounds like a
LA.
good niche right now where they can get away with that big comment.
But
pretty
they are,
easily.
yeah. But now it's becoming hugely popular, the whole idea of organic spirits. And so we were doing a video about Maker Walk, and it was 10:30 in the morning, and we went in there, and we're chatting about why they're making in LA and how they're bringing the kind of multiculturalism to what they're doing and produce and all this stuff. And they start making gin and tonics. Oh my God, they were so good.
Yeah.
And I don't normally drink gin and tonics, but there was I drank mine, and I drank, the camera guy was like, no, I can't drink at 10:30 in the morning, so I had his as well. And so you can imagine.
Oh, this is like in the AM.
Yeah,
like
10:30 in the
super
morning.
Early. Wow. I'm a big G&T fan.
Yeah.
It sounds like I need to go downtown.
You should try it.
To try this out.
Bright City Gin. It was they take the flavors of the kind of cultures in LA and put them into the gin, subtle, but things like Szechuan peppercorns, and it's really good. So I definitely recommend it.
I will be checking that out during one of my next trips to LA. Maybe even during this trip. I don't know
Why
what
not?
type of spare time I'll have. I might need to make my way down there soon. We're probably going to be wrapping up here reasonably quick, but I did want to ask you a question that I haven't heard brought up on other shows before. And this goes back to your extensive resume of traits, experiences, and skills. You describe yourself as an authentic food aficionado.
Yes.
And I want to understand what that means and maybe where we find some of that type of authentic food as well.
I have to say that nothing annoys me more than expensive and not very good food. Like pretentious, overpriced, like whatever. And that's what's so cool about LA is actually there's so much, just the ethnic foods here are so good. And I just love the hole-in-the-wall places. So I don't know, like Mariscos places. There's a place not that far from here. We're in Marina del Rey called Mariscos Shente. I was very disappointed when I actually saw it on, what's the guy's name?
Triple D, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, or
No,
Anthony
no.
Bourdain?
Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, he's actually
He's
he
ruined
said
the
that,
secret.
Well,
He's
he said
ruined
it
the
was
secret.
I think they have two, and he said it was in Inglewood, but he actually was in the one that I generally go to, and I won't tell you where that is. But
Got it. All right. Secret safe with you. I don't have nearly the audience Anthony Bourdain does, so you don't need to worry about like that getting
Oh,
out.
you said you did. What's up with that?
Well, I've got to hook my guests in somehow.
And you're, from what I understand, you're going down to Long Beach, and so there's an amazing Cambodian community down there. So every time I'm down in that neighborhood, I can't help myself. I always stop in at one of those Cambodian restaurants. If I go do adventuring in the Inland Empire, always go to San Gabriel Valley. Amazing Chinese food, Asian food.
Okay. You really have covered like the greater
Oh my
LA
God,
area with this
there's
answer.
so much great food here, and what's so amazing is I think that there's an appreciation for that as well. It's not about the price, and there definitely are trendy restaurants, but it's really about bringing together all these cultures. And I think, from what I understand, there's 44 countries where the second largest population of that ethnicity is in LA after their home country. So if you want ethnic food, if you want to experience these cultures, LA is the place. It's like a microcosm of the world.
I have a great time every time I come down here. No, I mean, I've got that friendly rivalry now that I live up in San Francisco, but as much as I try to overstate that rivalry sometimes, I do have a ton of fun every time I'm through here, and it's for reasons like that I enjoy the city. You know, Z, we've talked about probably a bigger variety of topics than I've ever done on this show before. From manufacturing to tech to your story to food here in LA. My last real question is there anything that we haven't shared with our audience yet that you'd like to maybe
Everything
some final
else.
Yeah, I was going to say I have the way I see this going is they're going to be like, why didn't you talk more about TED, or why didn't you talk more about working for the Obama administration? I didn't even think I mentioned the fact that you were an advisor for the Obama administration, but we'll wait for another
That's
episode
a whole
for that.
can of worms. They're all can of worms.
I was going to say, I'm going to wait to hear what the audience says, and I have a feeling you'll be back on this show sooner or
fine.
later. So,
There's a helicopter going overhead.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
This is a very LA moment.
Why such? Helicopters
So when you
overhead?
live in LA, you become a connoisseur of helicopters. You know the difference between
Good soundbite.
yeah. You know the difference between commuter helicopters,
Okay.
paparazzi, and news helicopters?
Oh, wow.
You can actually tell the difference. Like, you know if something's going down based on how things are happening. Sometimes, like, 2 in.the morning, you have this circling helicopter with a flashlight that, like, lock your doors.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And then you got the hovering. Lindsay Lohan probably did another something stupid.
Yeah, that I could see that. Well, I'm glad we got at least one good pop culture reference while we were on here in LA. But I guess maybe a way to rephrase what I was saying. You mentioned one thing that you try to do throughout all your projects is helping others find their voice, amplify their what's the right way to describe it?
Make impact with their ideas, I guess.
Make an impact. What is one final piece of advice that people can go do to make their impact?
I would say think about what you can give before you can get. And you have to know where to draw the line, right? Like, you can't just give, right? But you think about people who've been very successful and have really changed the world. If you're just changing a little bit here and there, you try to be very possessive about things. But get rid of the ego, get rid of your attachment to a particular outcome, and think about if you want to see a change in the world. It sounds really woo-woo, and I'm not that way, but think about what it's going to take. And if you're really going to change the world, you need a lot of people on your side. And perfect example, Elon Musk gave away access to a lot of his IP around battery technologies. That was not just generosity. I mean, that was literally very clever, because in a similar way, there was a innovator back in the 50s, I believe. His name was Malcolm McLean, and he was in the shipping industry, and he realized that the shipping industry was very inefficient, and he came up with a very clever way of creating intermodal transport. You know, these container ships, basically, that could then, you can go from container ship to truck to train. He gave that IP away, and why did he give that away? It was because he was at the forefront of it. He's still going to be at the front of it.
Yeah.
But it was going to be worthless unless everyone else adopted it. So when you're truly innovating and you're really changing the world, maybe it's TEDx, right? TED gave away their formula to the world, and now everyone has heard of TED.
Yep.
So it's really about being very strategic about what you give away, and in the end, you're going to be successful.
That's huge. I love the giving mentality first and foremost, because there's a book called Go Giver that's really focused on that. Other influencers are very much talking about how you've got to be giving before you ever even ask.
Yeah.
Great advice. And I love once again, you've had some of the best anecdotes I've had on this show to contextualize it. So just a couple wrap-up questions then in that case. What is next for Z Holly?
So I want to, we're ordering some, no, we're good.
Excuse me, did you authorize the podcast to be in the restaurant right now?
Yeah, I called yesterday to check in.
Because that needs to be done through our corporate office
Okay.
for any kind of broadcast, and we also have a reservation that's
Oh, we're about to
We're about to leave.
it's
Yeah.
good
Okay.
to go.
Thanks
Cool.
so much.
Yep, we'll be out of here in 2 minutes.
And so the corporate mentality shows up.
Yes. I was waiting for that. Anyway, so we got a wrap. So what's next for Z Holly?
I mean, we're scaling, Make It in LA, which is really a locally focused effort to connect the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and manufacturing. I'm looking to take the art of manufacturing on the road and visit other cities, and we've already been interviewing people around the world, but really having more of a look at what are different cities doing. We're doing more and more to really connect the ecosystem and doing factory tour workshops. We just got a grant for $40,000 that we're looking for matching funding
Wow.
for to expand our efforts.
Call to
And,
action for our listeners?
Yeah, so if you, we have amazing entrepreneurs and small businesses and folks that are emerging brands that don't have, they're really, really interested in new technologies and interested in finding new resources. So they're really ripe for potential sponsors, and I think that we're making a lot of impact. So that's kind of that's really what I'm focusing on right now.
And then what is the best way to stay in touch with you and Art of Manufacturing, Make It in LA? Where would you recommend people go to follow or
Absolutely.
keep track?
So for the podcast, you can either search on your favorite podcast player for the Art of Manufacturing or go to artofmfg.com. And if you're local to LA and you want to be involved in our events and on our mailing list and find out more news locally, you can go to makeitinla.org/connect.
Well, I know there are people in LA that listen to this show, so make sure you check that out. In the meantime, sounds like we've got to go. So, yeah.
We gotta go.
With that, cheers.
Cheers.
Z, thanks so much for being on the show. And for those of you listening, we will catch you guys again next time.
Tijuana sunrise shine upon my face. Oh, 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 oh. Tijuana sunrise shine upon my face.
First time ever where they've tried to shut down the Pubcast mid-show. I thought about editing that part out, but it was just too good not to leave in there. Glad to see that the Pubcast is finding a way to stick it to the man. Anyway, thank you for listening. That was Los Angeles' own Goldfinger with Tijuana Sunrise. I don't know, there was just something about being down in SoCal on the beach that made that seem like the perfect tune. That song's off their new album, The Knife, and you can check them out at goldfingermusic.com. Also, I don't know about you guys, but I'm still digging that whole charm list idea. That might have been my biggest personal takeaway from this episode. It's just kind of a good gratitude exercise, and I know that it helped reframe my idea a bit around having a bucket list. But hey, Z, I'm still going to make it to 100 countries. I can't let go of that goal. Speaking of the charm list, there were a lot of takeaways and resources from this episode, including Z's podcast, The Art of Manufacturing, and her work with Make It in LA. Rather than give you a bunch of websites and URLs in the outro here, my call to action for you is to head over to pubcastworldwide.com, where I have links to all of these resources in the show notes page for this episode. While you're there, I also made mention that there are plenty of other topics that we could have discussed on this episode. So if there's more about Z you'd like to hear about, maybe even in a future round 2 episode, let us know in the comments. Again, that's pubcastworldwide.com. All right, hope you all had fun today because I had a blast. Stay thirsty, and I will see you again next time. Cheers!